The rain hadn't stopped since noon. It drummed against the glass panes of the old Greyhaven cottage like impatient fingers, each drop echoing in the hollow quiet of the house. Emma adjusted the silverware on the dining table for the third time, aligning the knives perfectly beside the plates, white porcelain with faint cracks around the edges. Daniel had always hated those cracks. Everything in this house should be whole, he used to say. The roast was growing cold. Candles flickered, their flames bending under the draft sneaking through the half-shut window. A clock ticked somewhere behind her, too loud, too deliberate. Marked every second Daniel was late. 7:15, 7:40, 8 o'clock. She dialed his number again, listening to the endless hum before the voicemail clicked in. "This is Daniel. Leave a message." Her hand trembled as she hung up. She told herself it was nothing, that he was caught in traffic or maybe had stopped for wine like last year. But the silence of the house contradicted her hope. Every sound, the thunder outside, the whine of the kettle, seemed to mock her optimism. By 9, the food had congealed. She poured herself a glass of wine, staring at the empty chair across from her, a piece of ribbon still tied to its back, the same red one from their wedding. It looked absurd now, dangling over an untouched plate. When the phone finally rang, she almost didn't answer. Her reflection in the dark window startled her, pale, hollow-eyed, with mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Mrs. Collins?" a male voice said. "This is Officer Reeves from the Greyhaven PD. I'm afraid we found your husband's car near Cliffside Point. Engine running. No sign of him." The world tilted. She pressed her palm against the wall for balance. "No sign?" she whispered. "None. We'll need you to come down." Her gaze drifted to the table. 2 candles burning low, one sputtering out. The other stayed lit stubbornly, as if refusing to admit something terrible had begun. She turned toward the door, raincoat trembling in her hands. Outside, thunder cracked, and for a fleeting moment, it sounded like laughter. The kitchen still smelled of rosemary and wine when the detectives arrived. The candles had long melted into pale puddles, their wax tracing silent rivers across the tablecloth. Emma sat at the head of the table, her hands clasped too tightly, knuckles bone white. Detective Reeves, tall and sharp-eyed, moved through the room with the quiet precision of someone accustomed to tragedy. His partner, a younger officer named Harlow, jotted notes without looking up. Reeves studied the scene, the untouched plates, the chilled food, the faint impression of a man's watch still lying by the sink. "You said he never came home?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, swallowing hard. "No calls. No texts, nothing," her voice cracked. "This dinner was supposed to be—" She stopped herself. Happy, she wanted to say, but the word felt dishonest now. Reeves looked toward the empty chair. "Mind if we ask about last night?" Her eyes darted toward the window, where the rain still fell in thin, relentless lines. "We argued," she admitted. "Just words. We've been tense lately." "What about?" Emma hesitated. The silence grew heavy. "About you, Daniel," she thought. "About how you make me feel like I'm losing my mind." Instead, she said, "Nothing important. Marriage things." Harlow cleared his throat. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Latham, said she heard shouting." Around midnight, Emma flinched. "It wasn't shouting. Not really. He gets frustrated." I was tired. We both were. A flash of memory sliced through her mind. Daniel's hand slamming against the table, the glass tipping, the wine spilling like blood, his voice low, dangerous. "You'll regret embarrassing me, Emma." The memory dissolved, leaving her cold. Reeves watched her carefully. "When was the last time you saw him?" She stared at the chair across from her. "Yesterday morning. He kissed me before work. Said he'd be home by 7. Reeves nodded slowly, as though assembling puzzle pieces she couldn't yet see. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow for a statement." Just routine. When they left, the house seemed to exhale, the walls groaning softly, the air thick with something unsaid. Emma walked to the table and pulled out Daniel's chair. It scraped across the floor, the sound sharp as guilt. She sat in it. The seat was still warm, impossibly. Or maybe that was her imagination. The echo of his presence clinging to her like a shadow that refused to fade. Outside, the storm quieted. In its stillness, she thought she heard the faint hum of his voice, Or maybe it was only the sea. Morning crept into the house like an unwelcome guest. The storm had passed, but the air remained damp, heavy with the smell of wet wood and salt. Emma hadn't slept. She sat in Daniel's office, the one room he had always kept locked. Reeves's questions still echoed in her mind, about the shouting, about Daniel's disappearance, until silence became unbearable. The drawer resisted her at first. He'd always been meticulous, every paper precisely folded, every file labeled in his clean, decisive handwriting. Control was Daniel's love language, she thought bitterly. She tried one key after another, until she found the right one, tucked inside a hollowed book of poetry he'd once given her. The irony wasn't lost on her. The drawer opened with a sigh. Inside were the pieces of a life she didn't recognize, business receipts, a burner phone, and finally, a thick envelope marked Eleanor. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the contents. Photographs, dozens of them. A woman, maybe early 30s, with auburn hair and a nervous smile. Some photos were recent, taken in restaurants, hotel lobbies, a beach she didn't know. Others were intimate, too intimate. Emma's throat tightened. One image caught her eye. Daniel's hand on Eleanor's waist, his wedding ring glinting like a cruel reminder. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She remembered the way Daniel used to joke about his business trips, how he'd kiss her forehead before leaving, assuring her she'd go crazy without him. Maybe he meant it. Maybe that was the point. She sank back in his chair, clutching the photos, and her mind spiraled through years of their marriage, the laughter at dinner parties, the practiced affection in front of friends. The way he'd whisper, "We're perfect, aren't we, Em?" when she'd try to talk about the cracks forming between them. But perfection had always been Daniel's favorite illusion. The faint reflection of herself in the office mirror caught her eye. She stared, disheveled hair, sleepless eyes, and beneath it all something unfamiliar. Was this grief? Betrayal or relief? A sound from outside made her freeze. A car door slamming. She crept to the window, half expecting Daniel to appear, smiling like nothing had happened. Instead, it was Detective Reeves again, stepping from his cruiser, his expression unreadable. Emma hastily tucked the envelope back into the drawer, but left it unlocked this time. She didn't know why. Maybe she wanted them to find it. Maybe she wanted the truth to bleed out on its own. The knock came, steady, patient. When she opened the door, Reeves met her gaze with quiet gravity. "We found something near Cliffside Point," he said. "You might want to come with us." Her stomach tightened, her fingers gripping the frame for balance. Behind her, Daniel's office door swung open slightly, and the edge of the Eleanor file peeked into view, whispering secrets she wasn't ready to hear. The ride to Cliffside Point had been wordless. Emma sat in the back seat of the police cruiser, the sound of wipers cutting across glass like metronomes to her dread. When they arrived, the ocean stretched below, dark, endless, swallowing the cliffs with a quiet, merciless pull. Reeves led her toward a cordoned area near the rocks. "This is where we found his car," he said. The vehicle sat half sunken in mud, headlights still faintly flickering. No footprints after the rain, but there was something inside. Emma leaned closer. The passenger seat was stained, faint streaks of red smeared against the leather. "Blood?" she asked, voice barely more than breath. Reeves nodded. "We'll confirm it." Later that evening, her house was no longer her own. Investigators combed through every corner, the quiet replaced by the mechanical clicks of cameras and whispered instructions. Emma stood by the kitchen doorway, arms wrapped around herself as two forensic officers lifted floorboards near the stove. "Found something," one muttered. Reeves crouched beside them. A small, dark patch bled through the wood, subtle but unmistakable. He turned to Emma. "Mind explaining this?" She blinked, then shook her head quickly. "That's from a few weeks ago. I cut my hand cooking. Daniel said I should have cleaned it better." Her voice quavered on his name. She didn't mean to sound defensive, but the words came out sharp, desperate. Reeves studied her for a long moment, as if weighing the truth against her trembling. "We'll test it anyway." The officers packed the samples into clear bags. The smell of bleach hung faintly in the air, and Reeves's gaze flicked toward the sink, the bottle half empty. Emma followed his eyes. "I clean a lot when I'm anxious." He didn't reply. When they finally left, the silence returned, heavier than before. Emma sat on the floor, staring at the jagged space where the boards had been lifted. Her fingers brushed against the exposed nails, and for a fleeting second, she remembered Daniel's hands guiding hers when they'd first moved in, showing her how to hammer the boards back down. "You fix it until no one can see the cracks," he'd said. The memory fractured, dissolving into the sound of a door slamming, or maybe it was just her heart pounding. In the half-light, she thought she saw movement near the window, a shape passing, too quick, too fluid. She froze, listening. Only the ocean's roar answered. Emma rose slowly, stepping back. She caught her reflection in the dark glass, pale, wide-eyed, framed by the same house that now looked like a stranger's. Behind her, the kitchen clock ticked twice, then stopped completely. Outside, unseen beneath the rain-drenched earth, a trail of crimson waited to be uncovered. Greyhaven's rain had finally lifted, leaving the town veiled in mist. Detective Reeves stood outside a modest apartment complex at the edge of town, the address scrawled in Daniel's phone records. Apartment 3B, Eleanor Marsh. She answered the door cautiously, a woman whose beauty seemed faded by sleepless nights. Her auburn hair, the same from the photos Emma found, was tied loosely, strands clinging to her damp face. "You're here about Daniel," she said, not asking, only confirming what she already knew. Reeves nodded. "When was the last time you saw him?" Eleanor hesitated before motioning him inside. The apartment smelled faintly of cigarettes and perfume. A half-finished glass of wine sat on the table beside a stack of unopened mail. "2 nights ago," she said finally. "He told me he was going to end it with her." "Emma?" "Yes, he said he couldn't take it anymore, that she was unpredictable, dangerous even." She looked away, voice trembling. "He said if he didn't come back, it wouldn't be an accident." Reeves studied her closely. "Did you believe him?" Her eyes flickered, guilt, fear, maybe both. Daniel liked drama. He could make the smallest thing feel like the end of the world. But that night he was different. Scared. Reeves's gaze swept across the room. The clutter, the tension, the ghost of a man still present. On the wall hung a framed photo. Daniel and Eleanor at a seaside cafe, smiling. The same cafe near Cliffside Point. Did he say where he was going? She nodded slowly. He said he needed to get something from the house, something that would make it all end. I thought he meant divorce papers. I didn't ask. When Reeves left, the mist had thickened. He drove in silence, the wipers squealing against the windshield. The image of Eleanor's trembling hands lingered in his mind. Not those of a liar, but of someone haunted by what she knew. Back at the station, the blood test results from Emma's kitchen arrived. Type A negative, Daniel's type. Reeves exhaled, rubbing his temples. The puzzle pieces were falling together, but too neatly, too soon. He picked up the phone. "Get Mrs. Collins in for questioning," he said. Across town, Emma sat alone in the dim glow of her living room, staring at the ocean through rain-streaked glass. The phone rang once, twice. She didn't need to answer to know who it was, or why. Outside, the tide pulled harder against the cliffs, erasing footprints no one remembered making. The interrogation room was small, sterile, a windowless box humming with fluorescent light. Emma sat across from Detective Reeves, her hands folded neatly on the table as if holding herself together. The air between them was thick with questions he hadn't yet asked. On the table sat a plastic evidence bag. Inside it, a single black USB drive. Reeves spoke first. "We found this in Daniel's study, hidden behind the baseboard of his desk." Emma frowned faintly. "A flash drive?" "More than that," he replied, sliding it into the laptop before her. "Your husband installed hidden surveillance cameras in your home, mostly in the kitchen and living room. The system auto-uploaded recordings to this drive." Emma's breath caught. He recorded me?" Reeves didn't answer. The first video flickered to life. The timestamp read 2 nights before Daniel vanished. Emma appeared on screen, pacing the kitchen, her voice trembling. "You think you can just erase me?" she hissed, though Daniel's response was faint off-screen. Then came the sound of shattering glass. Reeves paused the video, glancing up. "You want to explain that?" She shook her head quickly. "We argued. He was drunk. It wasn't what it looks like." He pressed play again. The next clip showed Daniel sitting at the table, calm, almost smiling. "You overreact, Em," he said, his tone low, coaxing. "If you didn't make me angry, I wouldn't have to teach you lessons." Emma flinched, turning away from the screen. "Please, stop it." Reeves watched her reaction more than the footage. The final video loaded automatically. This one had no timestamp. The camera faced the kitchen doorway. Daniel's voice was faint, pleading. Then Emma entered the frame, disheveled, trembling, mascara smeared. She stood over him, whispering through broken breaths. "I warned you, Daniel. Don't make me do this." Then static. The footage cut to black, Emma's face drained of color. "That's not what it seems. You don't know?" Reeves leaned forward. "Then help me understand. Because right now, it looks like premeditation." Her hands gripped the edge of the table until her nails dug crescents into the wood. "He made me believe I was losing my mind," she said quietly. "He wanted control. He filmed me crying, screaming, to prove I was unstable. That's what he did best. Twist everything." Reeves studied her, conflicted. There was something raw in her voice, too fragile to be rehearsed, too sharp to be false. When she left the station that evening, the mist had returned, soft and colorless. Across the parking lot, Reeves watched her silhouette disappear into the fog. He turned back toward his desk where the USB still sat beside his notes. The last file on it, one he hadn't yet opened, was labeled, "Final, do not delete." Reeves hadn't slept in 2 days. The glow from the monitor illuminated his tired face as he replayed the last video again. Emma's voice whispering those haunting words, "Don't make me do this." The clip ended in the same static burst, mocking him with what it refused to show. By morning, the district attorney had enough. The warrant came swiftly. Emma Collins was formally charged with second-degree murder. The evidence, the blood, the argument, the tapes, told one story. But Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the whole one. When they brought her into the interrogation room again, she no longer trembled. She looked almost serene, her wrists cuffed, her hair tied back neatly. The calm of someone who had already accepted a verdict the world hadn't yet spoken. "Emma," Reeves began carefully. "The video, the blood, Daniel's car, it all points to you. Help me understand why." She met his gaze, eyes steady. "Why?" she echoed. "Because he wanted this. He wanted me to break. He said once that every woman had a limit. Maybe he just wanted to see mine." Reeves hesitated. "You're saying he provoked you?" A faint smile tugged at her lips. "No, detective. I'm saying he built me." Her words hung heavy in the air, flashbacks unfurled in her mind. Nights where Daniel would wake her just to accuse her of moving things, of lying about conversations that never happened, the silent treatment that lasted days, the love letters that followed, apologizing for things he never admitted. He had shaped her world brick by brick, until she couldn't tell which memories were hers and which were his. "He used to record me crying," she whispered. "Then play it back when guests came. Said I was unstable, that I needed help, and I started believing him." Reeves studied her, the rhythm of her voice almost hypnotic. "So you killed him?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Wouldn't you if you finally realized the man you loved had been erasing you piece by piece?" For a long moment, Reeves said nothing. Outside, the rain began again, faint against the windows, the same rhythm that had started it all. When Emma was escorted out, Reeves remained seated, staring at the case files. The puzzle no longer looked like guilt or innocence, only two reflections in the same cracked mirror. On his desk, the USB drive blinked once, signaling a new file transfer he hadn't initiated. The title appeared slowly, as if typed by unseen hands. Eleanor Confession MP4. The file labeled Eleanor Confession MP4 loaded slowly, the buffering wheel spinning like a noose tightening. Reeves sat alone in the dim office. the storm outside whispering against the glass. When the screen finally lit, Eleanor appeared, pale, eyes red-rimmed, voice trembling. "I need this on record," she began, "because if they find me next, I want the truth somewhere." Reeves leaned forward. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. Eleanor took a deep breath. Daniel said he wanted to disappear, make Emma pay for what she'd done to him. He said she ruined his life, made him feel small. But it was his idea, all of it. The blood in the car, the fight, the missing act. He planned it down to the minute. He told me once it'd be poetic justice if she rotted for something she didn't do. Her hands trembled as she spoke. He said he'd meet me after it was over, that we'd leave Greyhaven together. But when I got to the motel, she paused, tears spilling silently. He was already dead. Reeves froze. He was lying on the bed. There was blood everywhere. The knife was on the floor, his wedding ring shoved down his throat. She shuddered, like someone wanted to make sure the world remembered what he broke. For a moment, Eleanor stared past the camera, as if seeing something only she could. "I didn't call the police. I panicked. I wiped my prints, left through the back door. I thought Emma had done it, but now, not so sure." The video ended abruptly, leaving only static. Reeves sat motionless, the hum of the old computer filling the silence. The entire narrative, the case, the guilt, the fragile truth, had cracked open. He replayed the last line in his head. "I'm not so sure. If Eleanor hadn't killed Daniel and Emma swore she hadn't, then who had?" He grabbed his coat, heading into the rain-soaked night. Somewhere between the lies and the bodies, there was one vow still unbroken. The promise that every secret in Greyhaven eventually surfaced. At the motel, room 12 waited in silence, door half open. A single light flickering inside. On the bedspread, blood still darkened the sheets. And beside it, in the corner of the room, something glinted. A camera lens. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and rain. The kind of dampness that clung to Greyhaven even in daylight. Emma sat at the defense table, hands folded neatly, wrists bare now that the cuffs were gone. Her face was unreadable, carved from the same stillness that once made Daniel furious. The gallery buzzed behind her, journalists whispering like vultures waiting for movement. Reeves stood near the back. He wasn't on the case anymore. Internal affairs had taken over after the Eleanor tape. But he couldn't stay away. Something about Emma's calm unsettled him. The way she met accusation with silence, like she'd already accepted the worst. The prosecution began first. "Ladies and gentlemen," the attorney said, pacing before the jury, "this was not a crime of passion. This was cold calculation. Emma Collins knew exactly what she was doing. Her husband was preparing to leave her, for another woman. And rather than face rejection, she ensured he could never leave again." A murmur rippled through the room. The prosecutor held up the crime scene photos. The car, the bloodstains, the kitchen floorboards. She hid evidence, lied to investigators, and even watched her own husband bleed out. Emma didn't flinch. When it was the defense's turn, her lawyer, Grace Holloway, rose slowly. "You've heard the story of a killer," she said. "Now hear the story of a woman who survived her husband." A hush fell. Grace walked closer to the jury, lowering her tone. Daniel Collins controlled everything. The house, the finances, even her memories. He recorded her breakdowns to convince her she was unstable. He cheated, humiliated her, gaslighted her until she questioned what was real. And when she finally stood up to him, he decided to make her his final masterpiece. A victim painted as a murderer. She turned toward Emma. "Tell them, Emma. What did Daniel make you believe?" Emma's voice was soft, almost childlike. "That love meant obedience. That I was lucky he chose me." She looked up, her eyes glassy. "But love shouldn't feel like a cage, should it?" The courtroom stayed silent. Even Reeves shifted uneasily. As the defense rested, the judge called for a recess. Emma remained seated, staring at the grain of the wooden table, as though tracing the years of her marriage in its grooves. Through flashes in her mind, Daniel's laughter turning sharp, his apologies laced with blame, she remembered who she had been before him. "Someone warm, someone whole." Grace placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," she whispered. Emma nodded faintly, but her gaze drifted toward the courtroom doors where Reeves stood. Their eyes met. Two people caught between truth and ruin. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but inevitable. And somewhere within the evidence vault, that last piece of proof, the camera from the motel room waited to speak. The storm broke again that night, sheets of rain turning the courthouse steps into rivers. Emma sat alone in the interrogation room for the last time. The same gray walls, the same flickering light overhead. But something in her had shifted. The fear that once clung to her had been replaced by a strange calm. A quiet resolve that unsettled even the officers who escorted her in. Detective Reeves entered, his coat dripping, the fatigue of months etched into his face. He closed the door softly behind him. "Emma," he said, voice low, "the jury deliberates tomorrow. But before this ends, I need to hear it, from you." She didn't look up. "You already have everything," she said. "The blood, the tapes, my silence." Reeves pulled out a small evidence bag and set it on the table. Inside was the motel camera. "We finally decrypted it," he said. "It shows you walking into the room, after Daniel was already dead. You touched him, Emma. You took his ring." Her eyes flicked to the bag, unblinking. "And?" Reeves leaned forward. "And you left it in his throat. Why?" The question hung between them like smoke. For a long time, Emma said nothing. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not with cruelty, but with exhaustion. "Because he promised me forever," she whispered. "And I just made sure he kept it." Reeves's pen stilled above the page. Her tone was weightless, almost tender. Not confession, not remorse, but release. "I didn't kill him," she continued. "When I found him, it was already done." The room smelled of blood and cologne. He looked peaceful, for once quiet. Her eyes glistened under the harsh light. "So I gave him what he always wanted, a symbol. The ring, he said, meant devotion. Only this time it meant silence." Reeves exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Emma, the jury. They'll decide whatever helps them sleep at night," she said softly. "But me? I've already made peace." He looked at her, seeing not a murderer, but a woman who had been hollowed out by love until only echoes remained. Outside, thunder rolled through the night like an unspoken verdict. Emma leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as the rain tapped the window. "Love doesn't end with death, detective," she murmured. "Sometimes it just changes shape." Reeves stared at her, unsure if she was confessing or finally telling the truth. 10 years later, Greyhaven had changed. The cliffs were fenced now, the cottage long sold to strangers who didn't know its history. But the story of Daniel and Emma Collins never truly left. It lingered like fog, whispered in cafes, retold by locals as both tragedy and warning. The new documentary, Vows Written in Blood. The Greyhaven case premiered on a cold autumn night. Its voiceover was smooth, haunting, the tone of truth retold too many times to still feel real. "Some say she was a victim," the narrator began. "Others a murderer. But perhaps both were prisoners of a promise neither could escape." Clips of the investigation flickered across the screen. Emma's pale face in court, the police photographs, the blood-soaked motel sheets. Then came Reeves, older now, weary-eyed, standing by the sea where it all began. "I never stopped thinking about that tape," he admitted. Something always felt wrong. He explained how, months after the trial, the motel camera was returned to evidence for digital preservation. A technician recently discovered a corrupted frame sequence buried in the footage, one no one had seen before. The screen went black. Then grainy footage appeared, the motel room. Daniel sitting on the bed, breathing hard, a knife trembling in his hand. In the mirror behind him, his reflection, wild-eyed, whispering something under his breath. "She'll thank me for this," he said. "One way or another, we'll never be apart." Then Emma entered the room. She didn't see the reflection, only him, broken, smiling faintly. The tape froze on that moment. Daniel gripping the knife first, his face split between terror and devotion. The narrator's voice returned, soft but piercing. The final image revealed what no one had known, that Daniel's vow was not to live with her, but to die with her. Reeves turned from the ocean, his expression unreadable. They destroyed each other long before that night. The blood was just the last chapter. Cut to the final interview. A journalist visiting the Greyhaven cemetery. 2 headstones side by side, Daniel Collins, date 4, 2015. Emma Collins, 6, 2022. The same epitaph etched on both. Forever means forever. The journalist placed a single red rose between them. The camera lingered as the wind picked up, scattering petals like drops of color against the gray stone. In the closing shot, the film replayed the beginning, the rain tapping on a window, the dinner table set for two, the candlelight flickering. Only now the camera panned slowly to the mirror across the room. There, faint but visible, were two reflections, seated opposite each other. Smiling, the narrator whispered the final line. Some vows are not broken by death. They are written in blood and remembered by those who dare to love. The credits rolled to silence, the sound of waves echoing one last time against the cliffs of Greyhaven.